Suri took a deep breath. "We save all of it," she said. "Not just the sprout, the whole garden. We do it together." Her mother smiled, and it was a tired, proud, frightened smile. "Then we had better hurry," she said. What happened next, Suri would remember for the rest of her life. Chief Adeyemi sent the call across the whole station, and the people of Hope Station came. Not because they were ordered to. There was no rule that said a colony must risk a cold night for a single garden. They came because a girl had reminded them why they were on Mars at all. They came because they wanted to. They worked fast against the clock. Engineers pulled every spare heat cell from storage. Families brought their own blankets, their thermal suits, the warm liners from their beds. They carried it all out along the surface path to Dome 7, hurrying while the wind rose and the dust began to fly, and the last light died in the sky. They got the last load inside just as the storm slammed down over the station like a great red hand, and the surface paths sealed shut behind them. Then the power went out. It happened all at once. The lights died. The hum of the machines stopped. In the main domes, the backup cells clicked on, keeping the air and the heat going for the people. But out in Dome 7, there was no backup. There was only the dark, the howling storm pressing on the glass, the deep cold of the Martian night beginning to creep in. And the colonists, gathered in a ring around the garden beds, with their arms full of warmth, they built a wall of it. They stacked the heat cells close around the beds and set them low to last. They laid the blankets over frames to hold a pocket of warm air above the soil. And then, because that was still not quite enough, they did the oldest thing of all. They sat close, shoulder to shoulder around the garden, and they shared their own body heat with the plants, the way you might keep an egg warm or a newborn. All night, in shifts, in the dark. It was a long night. The cold pressed in. People grew tired. The little ones fell asleep against the grown-ups. Grandmother sat by the bed with the sprout and told stories of earth gardens to keep everyone's spirits up. Of apple trees and tomatoes and the smell of cut grass after rain. Suri sat beside her with her hand cupped over the soil, feeling the warmth of her own palms sink down toward the roots. "Hold on," she whispered to the sprout over and over. "Hold on. Morning is coming. Just hold on." She did not know if it could hear her, but she knew that she could not have done anything else. The storm screamed and the temperature fell, and the night went on and on. And there were moments when Suri was sure it was hopeless, when her fingers were numb and the dark seemed to have swallowed the whole world. But every time she looked up, there were the others. 140 people, awake in the cold, refusing to give up on a garden. And she was not afraid anymore. Then, after the longest night Suri had ever known, the wind began to fall. The roar softened to a hiss, and then to a whisper, and then to nothing. A thin gray light came through the dome's glass, and then a pale pink one. And then, for the first time in 3 days, the small far side of Mars broke through the clearing dust and shone down into Dome 7. The power flickered back on. The lights warmed, and everyone leaned forward at once to look at the garden bed. The sprout was alive. It was a little bent. It was a little pale, but it was standing, green and whole, its tiny curled leaf turning even now toward the returning light. And it was not alone. All down the beds, in the soil they had kept warm with their own bodies through the dark, more green specks had pushed up in the night. 1 dozen, 2 dozen, a whole row of them. The first true garden of Mars, every seed saved, reaching up together toward the sun. The whole dome cheered. People who had not slept all night laughed and cried and hugged each other. Chief Adeyemi sat down heavily on the floor and shook his head and grinned. And Suri's mother put her arm around her and said, "You did this. You wouldn't let us give up. We did it, said Suri. All of us. Her grandmother knelt by the bed. She scooped up a little of the warm red soil, dark now with knife and water, and held it under Suri's nose. There, she said softly. Smell it. Suri breathed in. And it was true. All of it. Everything her grandmother had ever told her. The soil smelled cool and rich and alive, the smell of a thing that grows, the smell of springtime here, on Mars, where nothing had ever grown before. Suri looked at the green garden reaching for the small bright sun, and at the people all around it, and she understood at last that her grandmother had been right about something even bigger. Mars had never really been dead. It had only been waiting for someone who would not get up on it. And now spring had come to a whole new world, carried in by a girl who believed, and 140 people who would not let one small green hope freeze in the dark.